we asked this question. So we said, I don't think I'll be able to buy property for the next few years. Yes or no? So among the Gen Zers, 65% said, yes, I don't think I'm going to be able to purchase a home within the next few years. And 68% of millennials said the same.
You're listening to Build Up, the Homebuilder podcast, brought to you by ZGM.
I'm Jordan.
And I'm Santana.
I'm a home building marketer, brand strategist, and your host of the Build Up podcast.
And I'm a digital marketer and the executive producer of Build Up.
And together, we love applying our expertise to the home building industry. Join us as we uncover industry insights, chat with colleagues, and explore exciting ways to push the home building world forward.
Today on the podcast, Jordan, we have someone here to hopefully challenge us on some of the things that we talk about a lot in this podcast. We like to make sweeping generalizations on what different generations want and think and feel. And I know that we look into research, but to the extent, I'm not sure. So we have invited Allison Watson, Vice President at Leger, to come on to the podcast today. Leger is a market research and analytics firm, so she actually knows what she's talking about. And I'm excited for her to come and chat with us about some of the trends we're seeing.
Welcome to the show, Allison.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, really happy to be here. Happy to be a part of this and hopefully lend a little bit of insight and extra information. Like Santana mentioned, definitely do a lot of research all around, but we particularly here at Leger focus on youth and kind of generational impacts and insights. So hopefully we can lend some of that to this segment today.
I think that's perfect because, as Santana mentioned, this is our second season, and we've definitely made some statements about different generations and their behaviors. And I'm happy here, Allison, that you're either going to be here to back up what we've said, or maybe correct us on our course. But both are great. So thanks for being here. So I wanted to start off because one of the reasons we had you on the show is because you are specifically involved in today's youth study. So tell me a little bit about what that is and why that study.
The youth study is a study that we put on here at Leger. This is now our fourth iteration of it, our fifth iteration of it. Coming up actually at the end of this month is our first presentation. We will do 3 of them this year. So we'll cover finances, future, as well as worker. And the worker is a segment piece that we brought in last year's iteration, of course, with the Great Resignation and all the impacts of COVID. So that was a big kind of highlight, the change that we did this year. But why youth? What we find is, especially within the generations, there's a lot of nuances and a lot of things that change within the generations. But what we're finding with people's perspectives and their behaviors and their opinions, it's less about where people are geographically located, and we're finding it more and more to be more age driven and age focused. So we can kind of break down behaviors and trends and different thoughts and perspectives and group them by age. So that's why we felt it was really interesting to bring on the youth study. We focused on Generation Z, Gen Z, and millennials. Moving forward. And even within the millennials, we find that there's 3 kind of mini cohorts of the millennials. And those are what we break them down to be is the youngest. So they're the more carefree. And then we have the middle millennials who are a little bit more turbulent. They're going through some ups and downs, really trying to figure things out, realizing that they need to start making some big people decisions, but perhaps not quite there yet. And then we get into the stable or even cynical older millennials, which is actually where myself fall in the older generation of the millennials. And some of the words we use to describe them are cynical, stability, flexibility, more demanding, ethical, which really highlights kind of how I feel personally. And then with the turbulent, we classify them as more anxiety, more anxious, more mobile, more questioning, which is something we find really prevalent among the younger generations is they question things more, and they challenge what they're hearing more often. Power of Google in your hand, you're countering everything that you're hearing. And that's really where their habits are being formed. So this is kind of the generation that if anybody's out there trying to figure out who we need to reach out to, who we should maybe focus messaging on, who we should try to find out a little bit more about, it's really those middle millennials, because they're developing their habits. They're developing their life habits, their consumer habits, their what they want for their future. All of that's happening in kind of that 20 to 29-year-old range. And then our carefrees they're the optimists still. They're confident that, the future is probably going to be better than they think. Whereas we get older, that confidence and that optimism really starts to fade, as you heard our words to describe the stable.
That's really interesting. And I think that it makes sense when you talk about it. Is that something that you've seen historically? Does it usually start out with a very young generation just being super optimistic and, challenging everything?
I can't say for certain based on data that we have at Leger, but my assumption would be yes. I think any of us, when we're thinking about back to when we were mid-teen, late teen, finishing high school, thinking about what we wanted to do, really, you do feel that while you have your own stressors and you think that certain things are the biggest deal in the world, whether it's plans getting canceled on the weekend or having that part-time job or getting into university, you always have the hope that you're going to be able to attain whatever you want to attain, basically because you just haven't been through the experiences of life at this point. You haven't really gone through some of those major life moments yet that help define kind of more of our outlook and make us do pivots and do changes. So I think I would hope most people would start out very optimistic about their future and what the future will look like. But that not necessarily may not have been the case, that I can say for certainty. What I can say about our generations today, though, is compared to the baby boomers before us and Gen X before us, they were very, very linear in their life progression. So they had a plan. They knew they were going to go to school. They were going to get a job. They were going to stay in that job for 30 years. Within that 30 years, they were going to buy a house. They were going to start a family. They were, get married before all that, however it would work out. But that's just the way that the plan was. If they were going to go back to school, they maybe went back for their master's. But there wasn't as many ups and downs as youth are seeing today. So youth see a lot more opportunities to pivot from that linear course. So they are taking on more careers. They're switching careers completely. They're going to school for one thing, 2 years in, realize it's not for them and say, hey, that's okay. I'm going to go back into school, do something different, or do a different occupation altogether that may not require traditional schooling, whatever it may be. But they have a lot more ups and downs and twists and turns, which, while that gives them more opportunity, more flexibility, more freedom to kind of explore and figure out who they are, it also brings about a little bit more stress. Because as we see in our research, the youth today are not very optimistic about the future financially, like when it comes to their economic situation. Not that they think it's going to tank, but they just don't think it's going to get any better. They don't see a big upswing in opportunities for them. And that could be because they haven't had the stability that those before them, say our parents or grandparents or whoever it may be, had traditionally had before them. So it's just a different path. It looks a little bit different. There's some benefits to it, but there's some drawbacks. And unfortunately, the drawbacks that we're seeing with the youth is that they're more stressed about the future, whether it's economic, whether it's with world events that are going on around them that we haven't seen in how many years, that haven't been pressures. We're seeing, obviously, there's the issue of inflation at the moment and the thought of a recession and, all the scary looming words that cause a lot of anxiety in people. And already with a generation that thought, oh, I don't know if things are going to improve, 50% of them ish would think that it would improve into the next year. Well, once you start throwing out some of those kind of words and war and, supply chain issues and whatever else may be going on around them, it just impacts and brings down that optimism a little bit little bit more. So I think that's what's different between our younger generations compared to the older, is that they're more informed about what's going on around them, which also makes things seem a lot more dire, perhaps, than what it is. And because they're on this up and down path and this ability to pivot and move, that uncertainty and not being as stable as quickly lends to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see that and even feel a little bit in my own life. One of the questions, do you any insights or any research that you've done around, why we've seen this change with this generation? So previous generations, very linear, graduate or leave school, maybe get married, get a job or go to school, or there was very step-by-step actions, buy a house, have kids, blah, blah, blah. Why this younger generation, why are they breaking that linear model?
Yeah, I think the stable millennials are a lot more like the boomers than maybe they would like to admit. So those in the 30 to 40 range, probably, like I mentioned, they're a little bit more cynical. Maybe cynical is not quite the right word, but the way they are in their life right now, they're probably more stable. So those are the ones, obviously, with kids, families. They also, though, when they were growing up, were probably still under the influence of that linear projection of life, of how it should be. I think it really started to change with the generation. Well, I shouldn't say the generation, but the age cohort after that 30 to 40 years. So those 20 to 29-year-olds who started to have a little bit more insight and an opportunity to get the information more quickly about what opportunities are out there. And, they started to maybe put more value on breaking that traditional kind of go to school after school mold after high school, and do more travel and do more exploring into what other opportunities there are in life there. And I don't know what could exactly be the marker of that, but my assumption, if I think back to just conversations with youth and looking at youth, they're very informed, and we're social media and the rise of internet kind of growing up from right from the onset of the millennials and through, it just got more and more and more rapid and more in the moment and reactive and real time, and all this real information just gets more and more and more as we get younger and younger and younger. So they just have that information and the opportunity to explore that on their own without having to go to their parents for that information and have those conversations with their families. So they're making some of these thoughts and these decisions earlier based on this flood of information that they have access to that generations before just didn't have. A lot of the older generations didn't have social media to influence their thoughts like the generations now. So a lot of their, well, what would you do conversations would happen with their friends who were around them, who generally were probably more like-minded in the same circles, because that's just who you would gravitate to, or their parents, where nowadays we have this whole network of social interactions at our fingertips with people who you probably would never meet in your entire life, but you follow them because you think they're interesting for whatever reasons. So I think a lot of that is the social media influence that's starting to spark some of these different thoughts among youth.
Yeah, I can totally see that. So, positives and negatives to that. I think, as you've mentioned, it gives you this global view, accessible information, tons of inputs, but it also is very overwhelming and can be very stressful. And I think, like you mentioned, you're kind of seeing that with that younger generation.
Yeah, definitely. The younger generations, while it does open up a whole world of opportunity and possibilities, it's also for them, I think, impacting the bleakness that they think of the future, because obviously they're seeing the different social movements, they're seeing the different crises going on, they're seeing the best and the worst of society. So there's that side of it. It's having a huge impact, obviously, on mental health in ways that generations before us have never experienced, never talked about, never, while perhaps was there, just wasn't as socially acceptable to be so open about, which is something that generations are now comfortable talking about. And we see in our research, I think it's around 60% or something of the youth the Gen Zs and the millennials indicate that they personally have experienced bouts of serious depression, of what we would classify as serious depressional episodes. And that's just really shocking to anyone that, how can that be? How can, almost 2/3 of a generation say that they've been depressed? Well, if we look back at older generations, perhaps in the ways that we define depression now, I'm sure there would be cases of it before. It just wasn't something that was discussed and communicated. And a lot of that, when last year's study, we talked about the impact on social media on that, because a lot of that can be related to that as well, whether it's, body image issues that people are facing, or seeing others doing well and yourself not having that same life, or feeling that you can attain those same achievements or whatever it may be. So definitely the impacts of social media fall into play there, as well as another kind of downside of that evolution throughout our generation.
I've got to wonder how that impacts their major purchasing decisions, like a home, like a car, right? Because I'm so curious. Obviously, the economics play in, right? When you're younger, you just don't have home buyer money, but also that sense of skepticism. How does that impact their major purchasing?
Yeah, so it definitely puts it on a lower priority for them. It's still there. It's still a goal. Obviously, they want to become a home buyer. If we look at our research, and you speak to renters and you ask renters, does your rent, take up too much of your monthly spend in your budget allocation? Is it too heavy on you? They will respond yes. The majority will say yes. My rent is too much. I don't have enough to cover, or they won't say I don't have enough to cover my rent, but the rent takes up too much of a chunk of our budget. But we go to our homeowners in the youth sample and we ask, is your mortgage too much of your budget? And they'll say no. The majority will say no. Mortgage is good, mortgage is fine. Now, without being able to dive deeper into that, my assumption would be that as a homeowner, you feel that you're investing into something. You're investing into your future when you have a mortgage. Whereas when you're a renter, you don't have that same connection to that payment going out of your bank account every month. If we look at the youth today, and we ask them what their saving objectives are, they will say that their reasons for saving are because they want to prepare for their future, and that they want financial security. So those are two separate things, and those are the top two. The third on the list is buy a house. That's their third financial objective. So not as high as the financial security, but it's right up there, and then a car follows. That would be the next, kind of the major purchases of life. But it's not the first. So they're thinking about the future. They want to have their security in the future. Mortgage is third, but a mortgage could be seen as, and it could be argued that it's a financial security, that it's a way to secure your future. It's a way to invest in yourself and your future, because you're building equity and you're not throwing money into rent. I mean, people rent for many different reasons, but some don't have the want to become a homeowner for whichever reason, which is fine. But I think it's really important to communicate to youth that preparing for the future is fantastic, but owning a home is a way to invest and prepare for your future as well. Actually, we asked in this year's study this question. So we said, I don't think I'll be able to buy property for the next few years, yes or no? So among the Gen Zers, 65% said, yes, I don't think I'm going to be able to purchase a home within the next few years. And 68% of millennials said the same. So it's pretty high. But like I mentioned, there's a lot going on around them that's adding to that skepticism of whether a home buying at this point in time is the best decision for myself, or if it's even attainable, just given some prices. And to put that into context, especially with the millennials, because there might be a few people here who hear that and be like, oh, the population that can actually afford to buy a house isn't looking, over 2/3 aren't looking to buy a house. But currently 53% of millennials are a homeowner, which is is okay, still a majority. And 14% of Gen Zers are the younger homeowners. Obviously, the majority of Gen Zers are still at home with mom and dad at 53%. But we do have a majority of millennials who are current homeowners. They're just not looking to purchase new homes at this point in time, even if they have one, which could change depending when we do the study again next year. At the same time, we'll see how things go through the spring, especially during the spring and summer months here coming up. And see how that changes. I'd be interested in seeing how that changes because we've never had the words in the media in the background like inflation and recession going on since we've been doing this youth study. There's been COVID. There's been a few other things. There seems to always be something, but it's this year, especially when it comes to big purchases like homes and cars and savings for the future. That'll be really interesting, at least to myself and I'm sure a few others, to see how they respond to that next year.
One of the things I wanted to ask, do you think, and did the study sort of show, is this younger generation more financially stable or more financially savvy? Because those priorities of saving, seem to me at least to indicate that that's priority for them.
It's a little bit different for each cohort. So the millennials are a little bit different than the Gen Zers. So Gen Zers, they want to save. They want more information from the financial institutions. They do feel that they could get a little bit more understanding of what to do with their money and where to put their money, but they're not going to the financial institutions at that age. They're going to mom and dad, and really they don't have the financial inflow of finances to maybe think about that as far down the road. While they do want to save for the future, they think it's important, they want to have investments, they want information on that, they're already thinking about it, they're less likely to be able to act on it at this current point in time as then say the millennials. Obviously, as they get older, they tend to turn away from their parents, as we found in this year's study, where more are going to their partner for financial discussions and suggestions and support and ideas, or they're going to advisors. But millennials are actively taking that step to get the more professional advice than say the Gen Zers are. I don't think any of them enjoy managing their finances. I think it's kind of a rough topic for all of youth. And we actually asked that in our study this year, do you enjoy managing your finances? And they don't. It's not something that any of the Gen Zers or millennials wanted to do. What they want is they want to be more independent when it comes to their investments. So they are turning more towards those external advisors rather than the internal advisors. So for anyone in financial institutions who may hear this and listen to our webinars, not great news for those. And it's a little bit of an uphill battle for them to really connect with youth today, to bring them in and get them the information that they need. Not sure what is driving that. I don't know if it's because they want to be different than their parents before them, that they think that there's better options. And quite frankly, there's probably more options out there now when it comes to investments and opportunities of what to do with your money compared to the traditional, put it in the bank, put it in an RRSP, tax-free savings account, whatever it may be. So they're more open to the possibilities of a portfolio and what that portfolio may look like when it comes to their investments. Regardless of what decisions they're making, what they're doing, they do feel that they're informed. Now, do we know if they're ill-informed or well-informed? Not sure. We'd have to have a conversation with them and, run them through some questions to see if they answer things correctly. But overall, while they don't want to talk about their finances, they feel that they're informed. They aren't having trouble paying their major bills day to day, but they don't have enough to put away for savings. So that's just where their struggle is. They're getting by, but they're not at the point yet where they can really put a good chunk of their paycheck away into savings, month to month or year to year, whatever that may be.
With this generation, with the younger generations, are we seeing that they're delaying their home purchase further than earlier generations?
I think they're doing a lot of things later. I think that they are settling down with their education decision of what they're going to do. If they're going to do education, they're doing that later. They're not doing that right out of high school anymore. They're deciding on a career in that this is where I'm staying for more than 5 years, let's say, or 10 years to really put my roots down. They're delaying that just because they're doing more things. They're taking more pivots. They're exploring different opportunities. And they're also having children later. So I think with all of that, I would assume that they are delaying the decision to make a big purchase like a home. And that could be for a lot of reasons. One, if they don't have a stable job that they know is going to keep them in the area. This generation is very open to movement. They aren't tied down to a location or, hometown like generations before. They're willing to move where they feel that they're going to have a better quality of life for themselves. And they're not scared to take those chances. They're not scared to go and explore. But we might see that change a little bit now with how prevalent hybrid working models are, remote working opportunities. That might have an impact moving forward on how quickly the younger generation decide to perhaps build a home or buy a home if they can just stay in it and work every day without having to relocate or move around to find different opportunities. So again, I think I say this every year with any sort of tracking study, next year will be the year to really see what changes. But I think, especially when it comes to finances, I do feel that it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in this next year, especially with the youth, because I think that they're obviously a little concerned moving forward. Not so concerned that they think everything, their finances and everything about their life is going to absolutely tank. But they continue to be more pessimistic, and nothing yet has seemed to spike their optimism in their financial, the economic, the whole global outlook, and improvement in how we ask it. In all of those regards, it still hasn't really spiked up yet. So it'll be interesting to see when it does, what that driving factor was for the youth.
Yeah, so in today's economy, in this world of, inflation that we haven't seen, at least in my lifetime, and now talk about recession and high interest rates and everything kind of very tumultuous. So the younger generations are affected by that. They're feeling, that things are kind of pessimistic and they're not looking good for the near future, but they're not feeling it's all doom and gloom. Like they're seeing a light and they're seeing some positivity for the future.
So I wouldn't say that they're excited for anything for the future. I think they're just comfortable enough to make it through at this point and not see a dramatic decrease in their overall quality of life. But I think that perhaps they were on the verge of feeling a little bit better. I mean, we see in a lot of our research that was done earlier in the year, people's mindset in a lot of different things, whether it was purchasing or perceptions, were perhaps a little bit more rosy, let's say. And then the conversations about inflation and interest rates rising and all of that kind of doom and gloom, which started in, when was it? Probably the summer, early summer, perhaps, that really started to turn. It's kind of put us back whatever little baby steps we were starting to make earlier in the year.
I would love to pivot here for a second, and I'm curious, Allison, did you get any research around their different sentiments on brand loyalty? Like, do we see a major difference in generations in brand loyalty? And what influences that, if we do know?
Yeah, so last year we touched on this a little bit in our study, and it was really interesting because the youth today have a lot of opinions. They have a lot of opinions on different social movements. They have a lot of opinions on politics. They have a lot of distrust in government. They have a lot of distrust in traditional media. They question everything, and they are probably some of the savviest and most difficult consumers to deal with for different brands. If you're consumer packaged goods, real estate, whatever you're looking at for your consumer, they're a little bit more difficult. And we say that because, one, they have all these ideas and these opinions, and these, they want to support companies with really good environmental stances, or whatever other ESG kind of stance that a company may have. But the Gen Z, who tend to have the strongest social opinions and opinions on those kind of things, don't yet have the money, the funds, the finances to invest in those brands. Whether they have a job or whatever, but they're already forming their opinions of which brands they think are good, whether or not they can support them at that time, or invest in them, or become a consumer of them. We see with the kind of middle-aged millennials, when they start to have a little bit more income, that they're still referring back to what they thought, years before about different brands. They're making their opinions known of whether they think that they're good people and they're doing good things, and that's where I want to be a part of. And they're forming their habits in those middle millennial years. Those are 20 to 29 years. So they might be able to support some brands and make some contributions financially to different products and brands at that time. But those are the years that they're really building their habits to brand loyalty and who they want to be a part of. So they're exploring whether it's, having funds to go out socially, if they're having, they've moved out there, they're renting or being a homeowner. So they're looking at different, builders, home products, whatever it may be. So they're finding different shops and different brands that they want to purchase for different purposes. They're having their first experiences buying a car. Some of them are having their first experiences having their own utilities and making the decisions about who to go to for that. So it's all these first experiences in that time frame that millennials are really deciding who they're going to be a partner in, and which brands they're going to invest in. So I think there is brand loyalty. I think there is brand loyalty that starts at a very young age, even if they can't contribute to it financially. And they're always looking. They're always trying to find out more. They're very critical of brands, and they're ready to jump and raise red flags at the first sign of something that they don't agree with, that they don't think is contributing to being a better person, or that they can help, make the world a better place. So while they're making those decisions at a younger age and it's carrying through to when they're older and they're remembering those things, I think brands need to be very conscious of that and really try to be careful not to discredit the younger youth just because they can't contribute yet. Because very quickly they will be able to, and they will remember. The internet never forgets, and the youth will never forget, and they'll be able to find that. So that's one thing with the brand loyalty. I think that it's different now because they're starting to build their loyalty a lot younger, even without being able to contribute to it. And then I think it's very difficult for them in today's generations because they are so savvy when it comes to shopping. They can be in a brick and mortar location while on their phones scouring Amazon for reviews on products, or scanning Amazon for cheaper pricing options while they're looking at the product in the store. They can scan different flyers to find if there's cheaper product or comparable brands, perhaps, that got better reviews. They're way more informed by what they have available in their hand, even though they're staring at a product right in person. Or they're going to go to the store in person, look at it, and then purchase it for cheaper online. So that brick and mortar location is missing out on that purchase as well. So I think brands are in a little bit of a tough spot because they need to make sure that they're connecting with the young youth. And then they need to make sure that they are being just as savvy and just on top of everything as the consumers are when they're making their when they're making their purchasing decision. So it's a tough thing to combat, and I don't envy the position that anyone is in, because it might seem like a kind of like an endless or a winless kind of struggle or a position that they're in. But Yeah, I think that they will be loyal to a brand if they feel that that brand aligns with their values and that they are contributing to something good. That's what it really comes down to for the youth. They want to contribute to the better of society. They want society to be better. And that starts at the younger ages, and then they kind of recall some of those thoughts as they get older.
It's quite fascinating in the fact that, you know, that middle group, that middle cohort, is building all of their sort of understanding of the world and building all of their relationships with brands. And, you know, they may not be purchasing those brands right away, but they're still sort of making aspirational choices about the future based on things that they're learning today.
And quite frankly, they're also, on social media following it, or you have conversations. I'm sure if anyone's listening who has children in that kind of middle cohort, that they're very quick to provide their thoughts and recommendations to older generations who might be looking to make those purchases, because they're informed about it. Like they've already started to do their research, just as you said, that they have that thought process that, when I'm ready to make that decision, this is what I'm going to go with, and this is why. And I think, yeah, and then one of the biggest changes is they're looking past the options and the price of the product, and they're really looking more at the company and the community that surrounds that, which is a little bit different than generations before. I think we older generations maybe looked more at, well, what am I getting out of it physically? Is it going to be quality? Is it going to be, worth the value of what I'm spending on it? Where youth today look a little bit more about, well, what is the impact of me supporting that brand going to have on society as a whole? Is any good or potential good going to come of it? Or is it a company that is in the news for negative reasons that I don't want to support, no matter how good the quality is or how much value I'm going to get from that purchase? So yeah, I think that's also an interesting takeaway with the youth today. While they're making it younger, they're staying, kind of loyal to that as long as nothing deters them from it. But they're looking beyond kind of what traditionally consumers looked for in brands and products.
I want to take this opportunity to have you sort of validate or invalidate some of the assumptions that we've made on the podcast over the last 2 seasons. So one of the things we've said on the podcast in the past is we feel that the younger generations are really looking for quick, convenient access. They want information and they want communications quick, convenient, and on their terms.
Yeah, communication wise, yes, I would agree with that. And they need, quite frankly, need to be spoon fed information. Do social media because that's what they're scrolling through. If you're looking for anywhere to put media dollars behind any sort of communications effort, definitely. Yeah. Social media, fast, very clear, less clicks, all in one space.
Perfect. This kind of goes hand in hand. One of the other sort of pieces that we've spoken to is more and more, that younger generation is doing more research online on websites, and they're spending less time going to brick and mortar.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'd have to see. Haven't seen the results from this year's survey on what people are spending in store, but online purchasing has been on the rise, and they can find what they want about it. They can find the reviews. They can, find blog reviews, Amazon purchaser reviews, whatever it may be, at the touch of their finger, and they're banking on that. They are saying, if this many people said the same consistent thing about the quality or the texture or whatever it is, I'm banking on that. I don't need to go to the store and touch it and see it and know what it is. So yeah, definitely agree with that.
And then one of the last ones, so we've sort of talked about on the show that a lot of people see the younger generations, and specifically the older generations, see younger generations as being somewhat lazy They're not following through on a lot of things, and they're not doing or working as hard. It's seemingly working as hard as, older generations. And the argument that we've made, based on our research and understanding of things, is they're just so dedicated to a few things. They pour all of their energy and all of their effort, maybe into their job, or maybe into not-for-profit work, or maybe into something else. And the little things that surround that then become overwhelming, and they can't be handled. So it looks to someone else like, oh, well, they're being lazy. Whereas in fact, our research, it would be that it's not that case. It's the case that they're pouring themselves into a couple of things as opposed to being spread across a whole bunch of things.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's also lends to that their path is just different than other generations have seen. Generations haven't seen a life progression path like the millennials and Gen Zers have carved out for themselves and have started consistently going down as a group, this up and down, pivoting, changing, different focuses. So I think that lends to some of the perceptions of the laziness as well, just that it's something that others can't relate to. Like, what do you mean you aren't married and have kids and have a house by the time you're 30? You're still, gallivanting around or just working. So that could be seen as selfish, but they're also more informed and more willing to get involved on causes and throw their support in different avenues that I don't think we've seen in some of the older generations as strongly. Now, either that may be true or not. It could be just the rise of social media that we're seeing it more firsthand, rather than having to wait for, big news segments to come on to see what good is going on around and what initiatives people are working on. But yes, I would agree with that. I think it's less about being lazy. I think it's more about they have different priorities on what they're focusing on, and they're more willing to not try to do everything and be everything. They've realized they value their time, and they value their mental health, and they value the resources that they have around them. So they're more likely to focus and not try to do all and be all.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Thank you so much for joining us today to make Jordan's head even bigger and validate most of his assumptions.
Thank you, guys.
Our pleasure. So for our takeaways, God, there are so many, Jordan, but rather than wax poetic, I am just going to say that my takeaway is the research is there, the data is there. I think it's a worthwhile investment for companies to look into. At ZGM, we always say we're the perfect balance of humanity and technology. And what we really mean by that is, we want to appeal to the head and the heart, but you kind of need data to do a lot of that. And so just always challenging your assumptions would be my takeaway from this episode. So what are yours?
Yeah, I would agree that there's so many takeaways from this episode, but the one piece that really stood out to me was the younger generation. I think it was specifically Gen Z, who has, a lot of opinions, but also a lot of distrust. I think that, honestly, I don't blame them in the world that we live in today. I can feel that, and I could see as a younger individual growing up in today's world, you would feel that, like, who can I trust and what can I trust? And I think that is so important, specifically for home builders, all brands, but specifically for home builders, because this is a high research category. This is a category that is a major, major life purchase with a lot of money. Make me trust you. Help me trust you. Give me all the things I need to feel like you are a trustworthy partner. Do the things that build trust with me. And, I'm going to come back to my word of season 2, which is consistency. If you're a brand who is consistent in their message, in their product, in what they deliver, that is how you build trust. There's lots of other things you can do to build trust. You can be helpful, and you can go out and reach out to people and put on information seminars and all that different kind of stuff. But I think all of that is for naught if your brand isn't consistent in your message and what you deliver. So that's my takeaway.
100%. Totally agree.
This has been Build Up, a ZGM podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and subscribe on your favorite listening app. Thanks to Shelby, our editor, Santana, our executive producer, Scott for our original music, and you for listening along. Be sure to follow us on your favorite social platform at Build Up Podcast.